Gene, you're looking at me like I'm crazy. What do I know Paul Newman from?
Cool Hand Luke? The
Never seen
Life
it.
and Times of Judge Roy Bean?
Never seen it.
The fucking best salad dressing in your fucking supermarket aisle?
My ranch.
Yeah.
No.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Ash Balabushka Schlafly.
Hi, y'all.
And Big D Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
Each week, we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, or want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatthemovies.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, please subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV. We review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, Lovecraft Country, True Detective, and Watchmen. Find all that information and past episodes at shatontv.com. Finally, to hang out with us live all week long, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatthemovies.com/Twitch, where we play video games, host watch parties, and have special events. That's at shatthemovies.com/Twitch. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing today?
Gene, this week's exciting, like every week is here at Shat the Movies. And one of our kind listeners, David K., he knew we need some help sometimes with the finances to keep the lights on here. But David also works in the booze industry.
God bless.
So he was kind enough to send us some booze. He was kind enough to commission later this year's Risky Business. And this week, he decided to commission another Tom Cruise film, the 1986 sports drama, The Color of Money.
And David wrote in and said, guys, I love the podcast. I think the 80s and 90s were two of the best decades for movies. The 80s had a mix of timeless quality, think of The Breakfast Club, and timeless fun, i.e. Back to the Future. The 90s started the move to independent films like Pulp Fiction, and that changed the course of filmmaking in a very positive way. I like to commission the 80s film, The Color of Money. I remember seeing this movie with friends during a time when pool was very popular, at least with my group of friends, as was friendly gambling. We played poker constantly. After this movie, we started playing pool constantly as well. To start, this movie has Paul Newman and Tom Cruise, two of the finest actors on the planet. Then we have a bored Paul Newman trying to find his way back to his days of pool greatness by trying to mentor a rebellious, not so smart, but highly gifted pool player, Tom Cruise. The movie is gambling, a road trip, the development of a prodigy to greatness, memorable lines, and a roller coaster of emotions. Also, I like this as a commission because you rightfully blasted Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio for her role in Scarface. I agree, she wasn't great in the role, mostly due to her horrible Cuban accent. However, I do believe she more than redeems herself in this movie, which is no easy feat when your co-stars are Newman and Cruise. Keep up the great work. Regards, David K.
Didn't we also blast her for Robin Hood?
Yes.
Or did we like her in that?
God, she's so bad in that movie.
She's terrible. That's what I was going to say.
She's great in The Abyss. We haven't done The Abyss yet.
Yeah.
She's great in that one. Somebody commission it.
I've got a theory here that David, like Fast Eddie in The Color of Money, is trying to like cover up his tracks and play mind games with us, because what he wants us to believe is that he's commissioning this because of booze and fine acting and some sort of redemption arc for Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. But really, when you get down to it, he's just a huge Tom Cruise fan. And he's just trying to cover it up with all these other, side quests.
Yeah.
I think we also have to double check the bottles he sends to make sure he's not replacing the labels with wild turkey, and it's probably bottles of his own piss. So we got to be a little careful here, and let's check for the seal.
All right, well, let's pop open this bottle of Old McDonald and hit the trailer.
You're not going to do the plot breakdown?
Just skipping the breakdown where we saw it. You just get so he comes up with what his lines
no, and they're so good. And like you delivered them so well, but it's like
it was too soon. I just hate okay, anyway. All right. Well, The Color of Money is a 1986 sports drama directed by Martin Scorsese. It was the 9th film released by Touchstone Pictures, and it stars Paul Newman and Tom Cruise with Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. The film continues the story of pool hustler and stake-horse Edward Fast Eddie Felson from the 1959 novel The Hustler, with Newman reprising his role from the 1961 film adaptation. It begins more than 25 years after the events of the previous film, with Eddie retired from the pool circuit. Paul Newman won the Academy Award for Best Actor for his performance, and the film centers around the game of 9-ball, a pool variant played for high stakes. A challenge 9-ball match was named after it in 1997, at which Efrain Reyes defeated Earl Strickland to win the largest single match purse in pool history, $100,000. Big D, Ash, we always ask the question, what are your memories of the film we are reviewing? Big D, we'll start with you. What are your memories of The Color of Money?
So this came out in 86. I was 13 at the time. I do not remember at all where I was when I saw it. I was far too young to be going out to pool halls. And even now, I don't really enjoy pool. It's partially because I suck at it. I normally have this balance. If my blood alcohol content is a perfect, let's just say like a 1.27, it's like my wipe score. If it's right in that 10th of a range, I'm great. Either side of it, I'm terrible. I lack the patience. But this movie, the only thing I knew of it as a kid was the Eric Clapton video tie-in from the soundtrack, It's in the Way, that was on MTV all the time. But other than that, I think this is the first time I've sat down and watched it all the way through.
Yeah, same for me here. I know I've heard of this movie, but I don't think I'd ever actually seen it. And spoiler alert, I am the worst pool player in probably the world. I'm too short to hold the cue correctly. My nephew has a little kid version, and that pool cue I hold well, but like a real one, I just look ridiculous. Like they're as tall as I am. And so pool and I are just something that I never have really done. So a sports movie about pool didn't really seem like something I would enjoy. But then I heard that this was a Scorsese film, and I'm a huge Scorsese fan. And I, like our commissioner, I am a sucker for a young Tom Cruise. And I know that he's all, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs now, but young Tom Cruise in the 80s and in the 90s, even in like the early 2000s, I think he was pretty fucking great and a sight to behold. And I was really excited about watching this one.
This might come as a surprise to absolutely no one, but I spent a lot of my teen and college years around film students. And more often than not, if you were discussing great directors, Scorsese would come up. And more often than not, you get blasted if you said that like Godfather 2 was the best of his movies. Because among film buffs, The Color of Money is considered Scorsese's best film. And my older cousin Pej, who I talk about all the time on this pod, who really got me into movies and was my hookup for VHS rentals, he was very into Scorsese in the 90s. So he was really trying to teach me about movies as well. And I really wanted to understand movies the way grown-ups did. So I watched this with him when I was probably, about 10 years old. I understood absolutely nothing that was going on other than adults talk way too quietly. But I think now, as an adult, I also think that adults talk too quietly. Big D, let's hit the trailer.
Paul Newman, Tom Cruise, in a Martin Scorsese picture.
He's got the eye, he's got the stroke, he's got the fling.
Vincent's the best.
We got a racehorse here, a thoroughbred. You make him feel good, I teach him how to run. I'm not your daddy, I'm not your boyfriend, so don't be playing games with me. I'm your partner. Money. Hey, oh, come fix him. I got half of me that says I got a hold of the best thing that I ever seen, and half of me that says it just ain't worth it.
Why'd you take a walk? $500 says you choke right now. You used me.
Yes, I did.
I'm gonna leave.
Ah.
This is Fast Eddie Felson. Who the hell are you?
25 years ago, I won my share of medals. But it was over for me before it really got started. I'm hungry again.
See some heavy legend action.
I won his best game.
You want my game? You couldn't deal with my game, Jack. You're outmanned.
I'm gonna beat him, you know.
What makes you so sure?
Touchstone Pictures presents
You smell what I smell?
Smoke?
Money.
The color of money.
Fast Eddie Felson is a former pool hustler turned successful liquor salesman. He still stakes bets for players, including fellow hustler Julian, who is outmatched at 9-ball by the young Vincent Lauria. Recognizing Vincent's skill and his girlfriend Carmen's inexperience at luring players to lose money, Eddie tells the couple of their excellent potential for hustling. Eddie invites Vincent to leave for 6 weeks of hustling on the road, culminating in a 9-ball tournament in Atlantic City. Manipulating Vincent's insecurities about Carmen and giving him a valuable Balabushka cue stick, Eddie persuades him to accept his offer.
So this movie opens up, and I was really thrown by the style of the credits. It's very like Spike Lee referential. It's all in red. And I thought it was a strange choice for both Scorsese and a movie about pool. But the longer that it went on, the more nostalgic that this movie made me. So first, it made me super nostalgic for how in the 80s, there was that tradition where you had to watch all the credits before they would start with any actual plot. So you had to watch all the way from who directed it, all the way through, the cinematographers before you even got to the film. And then the other thing is the way that Scorsese shoots the cigarette smoke. And so it's this beautiful drifting shot of a cigarette that's just laying there on an ashtray that's just burning. And y'all, I was salivating because I miss smoking so much. And I don't know if either of you were smokers, but I smoked for about 10 years. And I have not smoked in almost 9. And that curl of that smoke and that dark light of a bar. I mean, y'all, I could smell it. I could taste it. I could taste the whiskey I would be drinking with it. And I just wanted to chain smoke alone in the back of the bar by the time all this was done.
Ash, you're so right. The 80s, my childhood, especially in New York, I remember there was a smell and a feel and a sound to the 80s. Like when you got in the back of a Cadillac and it had that leather sound or just the smell of smoke in a car or in an apartment, there was just adults smelled away. And it was a very comforting smell. And every Scorsese film has always felt to me like that back of the Cadillac, like that 70s hotel lobby bar. And I love this vibe. There are bars that you can still go to, like the Tally Ho in Scottsdale or the Peppermill in Las Vegas, that are a dying breed. They haven't changed at all. I actually just went to the Tally Ho this weekend. It's still exactly the same. Those red leatherette booths, weird sculptures, dim lighting, those stained glass lamps, and no windows. That was always the fucking rule. There are no windows in these places because you do not want daylight. You don't want to know what's going on in the outside world. And this movie took me right back there. I was so happy just with these opening credits.
For me, it's the smell of stale beer. If I smell stale beer, it takes me right back to college. I feel like I'm there. It all comes back. And I just think it's something that Scorsese does. He can translate almost like smell-o-vision. You see that pool hall and you're there. It's more than just a visual sense.
But the other thing he does is makes people talk way too fucking much and give you way too much information. And Big D, we've been doing this together for so long that I could hear your braingasm from 2,000 miles away as they're discussing 9-ball. This movie is very educational. It's got loads of mansplaining. We got to talk about what pool is and psychology and whiskey and romance. And 80s movies had this insatiable need to wow us with the legit lingo from whatever scene it was and facts that we could in turn spout at parties and pool halls for all the people who didn't see the movie. And we got some cool lines in The Color of Money. My favorite was when Paul Newman says, it's too much money and I'm an unknown. And I was like, oh, that'll come in handy. It's never going to come in handy. But Scorsese makes it feel like it's going to come in handy. But overall, I felt like I was just watching a less entertaining version of Rounders, which just had a little more oomph to it.
I think it's really interesting that you bring up rounders because for me, because I don't play pool, the big connections I kept making throughout this for some reason was poker, right? Like there's something about pool and poker that are so similar in the sense that it's all about logic and it's all about a skill that isn't athletic in nature, right? And I completely agree with you that in so many ways it felt like a movie like Rounders. It felt like any other poker film that you see. And I think in all of those films, what you get is a guy like Eddie. So you get Paul Newman's character in this film. And I know that I've seen Paul Newman in things, but like if you ask me to name all the things I'd seen Paul Newman in, could I do it? Gene, you're looking at me like I'm crazy. What do I know Paul Newman from?
Cool Hand Luke,
Never seen
Life
it.
and Times of Judge Roy Bean.
Never seen it.
The fucking best salad dressing in your fucking supermarket aisle.
My ranch.
Yeah.
No. I make my own salad dressing.
Not as good as Paul's.
You don't know that. But, there's something about him. He's so charismatic in such like an old school Hollywood way. And I loved watching him from the first scene that he came on because he's good looking. He dresses nice. He knows shit. Right? He's a hustler, but he's not gross about it. Like he isn't real schwarmy. And I loved his character immediately. And I know that this is a sequel and I have never seen the original. And a lot of people I respect, they say that this is inferior to that original film. But I really like seeing him here playing off that arrogance of Tom Cruise. And I thought it was a great partnership from the first scene they were in together.
First of all, dumb me, I had no idea that this was a sequel. I had no idea. Okay. So I'm coming into it without knowing that there's some material before. But Paul Newman, he's a different kind of actor. And at this point in his life, he was seasoned. I only remember like the Towering Inferno or the Sting, the young, handsome heartthrob. Here, he is the American version of Sean Connery. He can act with very little word said. Gene said everybody's talking, and I think that was done so that we, the audience, would think that Eddie was confident. He had it all going on. He was the master manipulator. So we need to establish that more than we do about Poole. But Eddie says, I'm a student of human moves. And Newman embodies that. His acting conveys those subtle little nuances. He doesn't use words. Cruise, on the other hand, though, I think you're giving him a pass. He's a rookie. He is struggling to keep up. And I know that Vincent is this reckless kid, but this is every other Tom Cruise character in the 80s. Vincent is Pete Maverick Mitchell. He's Brian Flanagan. This is Cole Trickle. Instead of flipping a pool cue, he'd be flipping a bottle or doing donuts in a NASCAR, okay? He's a one-trick pony, and at this point, he was just outmatched by Paul Newman.
Totally agree on that. And the only thing wrong with Paul Newman in this entire movie is that mustache. Because, listen, Paul Newman, he's got the most perfect face a man has ever had. But the key to that face, the part that just makes it fucking pop is that upper lip. I mean, you just want to suck on that motherfucker. And he's hiding it behind that mustache. It's killing me.
And surprisingly, he's got decent looking skin. A lot of times the close-ups that they hold on actors, a little gross. Him, he looks okay. But I realized that Shat the Movies has given me a problem. It's given me a tick, something that's affecting when we watch these movies, because we've done 200 of them. And after 3 seasons of Westworld, I realize I have a problem, and I'm going to come out and say it right now. But Shat the Movies, as we're watching, you're trying to predict what's the twist. Where is the big reveal? Who's going to double cross? Because you want to try to be smarter than everybody. And it's the same thing that keeps Westworld going. And I found myself preoccupied with that. Who's playing who? In every situation, I kept thinking, okay, Eddie is manipulating these 2 naive kids. He's just fucking with their head. Then I'm thinking that's going to be Vincent and Carmen who's doing a long con. And it just took away from the enjoyment. And I realized I should have just sat back and watched it as a movie.
Oh man, I don't know if that's true though, because I'm pretty sure that is the point of the movie. Like they set it up so you're always wondering who's conning whom and like who's in charge. It's very much like The Godfather. I mean, it's very Scorsese, right? Who's got the power move here, right? And if you have that context of the hustler, you know that Eddie was in Vincent's shoes once upon a time, like almost to a T. There was kind of like a love triangle. There was an older hustler. There was the young prodigy at the time who was Fast Eddie. There's a lot of parallels there. And I think the movie is built to spring that question on you, Big D, is has the hand Eddie's been dealt, like the screws that were put to him, as he says, has that changed him and jaded him and made him all about the money and made him kind of cynical? Or is he still like good and optimistic and a competitor at his core, right? Does he really want to be a winner? Is it not just about the money? And that's what made it so fun to watch.
And I think I was missing that context of the first film. Coming into this, I didn't have that to establish it. I'm going to go watch The Hustler, and then I'll come back to this one and see if it changes.
We appreciate your dedication. Vincent and Carmen hit the road with Eddie in his Cadillac. Eddie attempts to teach Vincent the art of hustling, but Vincent chafes at having to play below his ability. Eddie becomes fed up with Vincent's arrogance and leaves him. Rebuking Carmen for her advances toward him, Eddie reminds her that they are partners with a mutual business interest in Vincent. He returns to find Vincent grandstanding and beating the pool hall's best player, but scaring off a wealthier Mark. Eddie and Vincent decide Vincent must curb his ego if they are to succeed.
So at this early point in the movie, my detective work has broken it down that I'm convinced Eddie is the bad guy. In the end, it's going to turn out he is the one who's manipulating every situation because he doesn't seem to be bothered by any tactic. I can understand at pool, you can manipulate Vincent and say you're teaching him how to hustle. You're going to teach him the game. But he's manipulating the personal relationship between Carmen and Vincent. And it's odd. He's obviously trying to pull them apart. So I'm thinking, okay, is Carmen too bright? Is she going to expose what Eddie's trying to do? You know, he's planting that seed of doubt, and he gets a little bit of a joy as he keeps watering it and watering it. Oh, she's halfway out the door. Did you listen to her? And then that hotel scene where he barges in and Carmen's in her underwear and he grabs her, throws her in the shower and kind of fakes that he's going to assault her. I am convinced that he's going to twist and betray Vincent.
Yeah, I agree that Eddie is manipulating them from the start. And I also think that it is a bit sadistic at some times. Like when he puts his hand on Carmen's ass, that's unnecessary. You don't need that to sell it. This audience doesn't know you. They don't know what you would normally be like with a woman. And so putting your hand on her ass is not necessary. But he's doing that to destabilize the relationship, right? It's like the US and the Middle East. Keep things unstable and no one will, unite against you sort of thing. But what he does with Carmen in that scene, which I would say he did assault her. It wasn't like nearly assault. I was talking with some friends about this, said it was kind of rapey. Kind of rapey? This was full on rapey. But what he's doing there is clarifying that he is to her as she is to Vincent. She thinks that she's street, that she's savvy, and Vincent's just some sort of mark. He's just some sort of dope. He's just some sort of like golden boy. And he's like, no. You think you're seasoned and you're real. I am real. And you don't know what you're fucking playing with. But he stops, right? He has a point there. He's making a point. It's effective. For that reason, I think that like, this is a Paul Newman power move that, yes, you cannot pull off in real life, but in Scorsese world, it works.
Yeah, I don't know. I really liked the way that he played her because, she does that whole thing where she gets out of the shower and she lingers so he can see her amazing boobs. And she just walks off. And I got worried for a minute there that they were going to like have a thing. Like they were going to start, screwing around and that was going to be a whole subplot. And that would have sucked. And so I really liked that they went this way. And I don't know necessarily if I would go with the word rapey. I understand what you're saying there, but I think it's more what you're talking about. I think that he's showing who he is and he's showing his skill set there. And apparently if we had watched the first one, we would have known who he was. So maybe that ass grab wouldn't have seemed so out of place.
I do feel bad for Carmen though in all of this, because aside from having the most depressing hair I've ever seen in any movie, I mean, it looks like something died on top of her head. Her life is just such a fucking downer. Like, could you imagine being the woman in these situations? There's like this old dude and this young punk, and they're just sitting at a table jerking each other off. And you got to just fucking stand there off camera and just hang out. Right? It's like no wonder she begins taking risks. No wonder she's seeking attention in these situations. And I think this is smart movie making, right? Like it explains why she's behaving the way she is because she's living in a fucking untenable situation. And what is she? Like, what is her life? She's part business incubator and part childcare. Like that is her entire role. She's got Eddie lecturing her and assaulting her. She's got Vincent with like the emotional IQ of a fucking 15-year-old. There were several times where I was wondering what Carmen was even doing hanging around and how many times is she just going to let them send her home? It was fucked up.
Yeah, I kind of related to her because I dated a guy for a while who, like, he was not like a professional poker player, but he liked to pretend like he was. And we took a trip once for him to play in a tournament out in San Diego and again in Vegas. And it was really miserable because he just wanted me to like sit there and like watch him play for like hours on end. It's a bullshit position to be in. But I have to say, I mean, as much as I love Scorsese and I think that he writes really complex and dynamic characters, and I think you see that here in Eddie and you see it in the way that he directs Vincent. Carmen really is one dimensional. Like, she continues to be an example of like these other 80s films. I mean, like A Tequila Sunrise, not quite that bad, but these one dimensional women who don't serve any purpose other than to look good, I guess, other than her hair, and to just kind of hang on the corners and, you know, push the men into other conversations that they can have in the film.
See, I think the sign of a good film or story is when they can get you to like a character, hate a character, like a character, hate a character, change the way you feel about multiple characters in the story. I felt in the beginning that, yes, she was a damaged woman who had found Vincent, this innocent guy working at the kids' store, who was going to try to make a better life because guys in her past had been abusive and been dicks. Eddie is the one who turns it toxic. At that point, I thought Carmen was in pretty good control of the relationship. When Vincent gets a bit clingy, she puts him in his place. What, are you keeping track of me? No, get the hell out of my face. Then later on, the power dynamic changes. And I think she was in it to control Vincent. She saw an opportunity for them to grow. But throughout the movie, it changes multiple times.
Yeah, maybe. I would just point out that when she says that, that's part of their hustle that they're pulling. When she says, like, you know, you keeping track of me, that's what she was supposed to say to him. So again, she's just doing something that a dude told her to do. But speaking of the hustle, I have to tell you guys, like, I would be terrible at this. I mean, I don't know if either of you ever were like hustlers, but I would be the worst because I hate bullshitters and I just don't like people enough to have to sit and learn about them to learn how to bullshit them. Like, that I think sounds like the worst thing that I could ever be tasked with. And no, information hustle, I can do well. Like spinning information through writing, absolutely. But one-on-one, like interacting with people, I would be terrible. And I can relate to Vincent in this part of the film because I do not do things I'm not good at. It's one of my worst personality traits. I don't like trying things new. I like to do things I know I'm going to win at and I'm going to be the best at. And I couldn't do this thing of like making it look like I'm not good to make other people look better. I would make zero money. I would do exactly what Vincent does and I would win every time and be like, fuck y'all, I'm the best, and then walk out.
I mean, we've talked about the similarities between this and Rounders. In Rounders, they give the famous quote, if you're sitting at the table and you can't spot the mark, you are the mark. So I don't know how these guys that live in an environment where everybody seems to be a hustle, you know, everyone's hustling everyone, you're on your guard. How did they not get spotted when they walk into the room? The three of them together, immediately alarms should be going off. Woo, woo, hustler alert, hustler alert.
I mean, I could give this movie the benefit of the doubt because if you think about it, this is the 80s, right? So not everyone's a hustler. People in the 80s pretty much stuck to their local pool halls and maybe they were just playing pool. It's not necessarily that people don't recognize that there's a hustle going on. They think they could beat the hustle, right? So they're thinking like, oh yeah, this guy's going to come and try to hustle me, but I'm a fucking better pool player. I'm going to get him. All that being said, though, you know, Eddie's trying to educate them on like how to not blow their cover and how to like have an effective hustle. And Big D, you're absolutely right, because I kept thinking, wow, this nicely dressed older gentleman with the big chonk ass ring and big white Cadillac might alert people that a pool shark is out hunting. Like, Eddie is the one that's going to give it away. You look at him, you're like, this is weird. Who the fuck is that guy?
Yeah. Plus in Rounders, they're going to high stake games. So they're pretending to be the mark. These guys aren't going to local pool halls playing for a cold beer.
I kept thinking about that because I know it's the 80s, but it's three people on the road.
Right.
And they're like, oh, we won $60 tonight.
Yes, exactly.
Your fucking motel is going to cost more than that. That Cadillac getting like 6 miles to the gallon.
Yeah, exactly.
Eating at diners every fucking day. Well, Eddie and Carmen struggle to rein in Vincent's showboating and his jealousy when they pose as lovers during a scam. After a string of successful games, Vincent plays the famed Grady Seasons, but is directed by Eddie to dump the game to inflate the odds against Vincent in Atlantic City. Goaded by Grady, Vincent almost fails to throw the game, and Eddie is inspired to play again. After some success, Eddie is taken by a pool shark named Amos. Humiliated, Eddie leaves Vincent and Carmen with enough money to make it to Atlantic City, but takes the balabushka.
Okay, so my Shat the Movies detective hat was on. I said, we're into the second act. We're going to get a flip here where they're going to walk into a hustle. And when Eddie melts down over the course of that day, and he's drinking and he's playing that he's fragile, he's weak, I'm thinking this is where he's going to hustle Vincent and Carmen. I was completely wrong. This is where the movie kind of pivots. And we realize that Eddie, through the first act, isn't at all what we think he was. He isn't a good student of the game. He's actually pathetic. He's actually a broken guy who's looking for a chance at redemption, you know? And when Eddie gets mercilessly hustled by Forrest Whitaker, you know, it was just actually so sad. And you realize that Eddie is far more desperate than anybody else in this movie.
And I think that's what makes this movie really exceptional is it leaves that question open. Because, yeah, Eddie does get hustled, but I kept thinking maybe he wanted to get hustled. Like maybe he needed to feel that again. No, think about it. He disregarded all the rules he set for himself. And I don't think it's because he's stupid. I think it's because he needed something to get him back into the game. Like he needed to get his ass kicked. And I've seen this. I mean, the King Bee and I were at a bar one night. He came out. He didn't want to dance, but it was a dance night. He didn't want to drink, but it was a bar. But he came out anyway. And the only thing I can think of, that's the night he got his jaw broken, by the way. The only thing I think of is that this guy wanted to fucking get in a fight. And I almost want to say he wanted to get his ass kicked. Like, I think that this is a real paradox of the human mind as we're talking about like being a student of human moves. I think somewhere deep down, Eddie wanted to get beat. Like he let those rules go.
I think that's actually really brilliant because I hadn't thought about it like that before. And it would also make sense why he makes the pivot in this part of the movie and starts trying to come back, right? Because why else would he do that unless he had some motivation that came from a place he didn't even know really like consciously that he needed it to come from, which is Vincent, and like seeing like this young whippersnapper, you know, that's doing the things that he did just a few years before. And I think it also doesn't help that he's seen him do it in places he was successful in. And that brings me to these pool halls that we see, which I think are some of the best sets we've seen in movies in a while. Like whoever scouted for this movie did a great fucking job. And I always find it really funny in 80s films how like these types of places are dangerous and it's rebellious to be at them, you know, and I guess maybe it's because I grew up in New Orleans, but Orvis's place, let's just take that one where, you know, Vincent goes and he is so nervous when they go in and wants, you know, Carmen to leave. And then there's later on the one where he's wearing his glasses, like those places, they look like home to me. And I'm this really big believer that any bar that I go to needs to look lived in. I hate these really sanitized, like super nice places. And I want it to look, I mean, Gene, like you said earlier, I want it to look like it did 40 years before. I want it to look exactly the same if my dad took pictures there when he was in his 20s, when I took pictures there when I was in my 20s. And I just want four walls. I want some dark lighting and I want some cold fucking cheap drinks. And I wouldn't play pool at Orvis's, but I'd fucking hang out there every day of the week.
Like I'm as lefty as they come. I want safety for workers and I don't want them to have to inhale carcinogens and I want people to be able to like go out and be safe and all that stuff. But I should say that to me, a bar should be the one place in America where you can still go and be utterly abusive to yourself. Yes. Like just fucking let go. You know, maybe you pissed your pants. Like maybe you fucking smoked a cigarette. It's okay. Maybe you're doing a bump in the corner. That's fine because it's a bar. As long as you keep it, you know, and you're not going to people's homes and doing it. You're not doing it like at the grocery store. You're not doing it at Disneyland. I think it's okay.
Okay, so the movie, it pivots around the natural ability of Vincent to play pool and how he's a prodigy. And I just found myself asking, what qualifies an activity as a sport or a game? Okay. And the debate's been out there for, I think, like NASCAR and poker when it started making it big on ESPN, or esports now, or horse racing. Is it a game? You know, because you think NASCAR, there's a skill where you got to drive the car, but you're not physically, out there competing. You need the instrument around you, okay? Where, I mean, if we say that poker, because you're intellectually using your mind to outplay, I'm wondering, is darts a sport? Where do we draw the line? Is lawn darts a sport? What do you guys think?
So I would argue that a sport requires physical exertion and combined skill and stamina. So those would be my rules for it. So NASCAR, in fact, is incredibly physically grueling. I don't know if you've even done go-kart, but it wears you the fuck out. And driving a stock car or like a Formula One car, it is intensely draining physically. And I think that any game where also your physical exertion can wear you out to the point where it interferes with your skills, that to me is a sport. Anything where you don't have to use your body, and so therefore your physical exertion does not interfere with your skills and your cognitive abilities, that falls in the category of a game.
Okay, so as long as you just can't have zero physical ability. So esports?
I don't consider that a sport.
So what do you call it, though?
I would call it gaming.
Because, because you're talking about stamina, right? Like, I think mental stamina is as difficult as physical stamina is.
Yes.
So, like, chess. Is chess a sport?
No.
So what is it?
It's a game.
But how is that game different than, like, a football game?
Because if you were playing chess while you were like running, the running interferes with your ability to think, right? And now I think there is one thing that kind of crossed the line though, because if you play Killer Queen, you have to tap to keep your player flying, and that wears your arm out like horribly, and you can get all sorts of like arm strain. But
see, but I have kind of a twist on this. You said stamina. I think mental stamina would classify that, because poker, you just watch that. It is attrition. Who can last to day 5, at 4 a.m? I would fold because I would just make stupid moves.
Well, no, but I mean, that's what Ash is saying is the mental stamina. But what I would counter is that mental stamina could be compounded by physical stamina. That's what makes it difficult, right? Because you're still using your brain in every sport as well. But you also have to use your body, and your body impacts your ability to think. Again, that's Gene Lyon's definition of sport.
Yeah, it's in the way that you use it.
Yeah, I mean, both Oxford and Webster's would agree with you that it involves a physical exertion where individuals or teams compete against one another or others for entertainment. So I suppose you're right, but I don't know. I grew up all this time trying to defend dance as a sport, and so as long as you recognize that, I don't care.
Wait, I was going to say, does that make cross country not a sport because it doesn't entertain anyone?
No, it says or entertain.
Or entertain.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, no. It can be boring as fuck, but the or. Yeah, we're good.
Well, Eddie refines his skills at Orvis's pool hall, gets into shape by swimming laps, and gets a pair of corrective lens sunglasses. On a winning streak, he enters the Atlantic City tournament and runs into Vincent and Carmen, overhearing them arrange a bet with another player. Eddie, winning against Julian, and Vincent, beating Grady, are set to face each other. Janelle arrives to support Eddie, who triumphs against Vincent. As Eddie and Janelle celebrate, Vincent and Carmen surprise Eddie with $8,000, which is his cut of Vincent's winnings from intentionally losing their match. Okay, here at Shat the Movies, we have seen some shit when it comes to 80s training montages. But what the fuck was this montage? You're getting back into playing pool by swimming in a pool?
Yeah.
And getting your eyes checked. We spent like a minute on getting his eyes checked. I want my Rocky IV back.
Come on, he's got to get that stroke so he gets the sticky stick going, I mean, I didn't think it was that bad. And come on, those glasses, they were fucking badass, right? Like, I mean, he looked good. And I can't believe I'm defending a montage because I've made no qualms about how much I hate a montage, but I thought the transfer of money from him to him starting to win it back, I thought that was a cool device.
Oh.
I don't know. I kind of liked it.
And I also got to credit Scorsese. This montage, when they're doing the tournament and the breaks and the balls and the action, it is kinetic. I mean, pool could be boring. It's like these two dudes walking around the table with the stick, deciding where to shoot the ball. I found myself amazed by the skill of Paul Newman and Tom Cruise, because a lot of these scenes and a lot of the shots were 2 or 3 shots in sequence. So they had to be making these runs.
Well, and I read, because I was really curious, like Tom Cruise, he only trained for like 6 weeks, but he does every trick shot in this film except the one where he jumps the ball. Every other one that he does is him. And that one where he looks back and then he hits the ball in. And I don't know if that's a hard shot, because again, I suck at pool, but it looked pretty cool. So I liked it.
So Gene, you said you hate the montage. I could have used one more. I found myself saying, wow, Vincent's been gone about a week. He comes back. He is now the consummate pro. He's seasoned. He's being a dick to Carmen. He's playing the Eddie role. $1,500? You let 500 walk out the door. I needed to see a training montage, because this was a quicker transition from apprentice to master than when Luke spent a week with Yoda on Dagobah. There's never been anything faster than this.
Yeah, but I mean, you kind of need that so it doesn't give away the ending. Like if you saw Vincent and Carmen getting super, super slick with their moves, you'd be like, we see this coming.
Yeah, we saw Drago running around, getting shot up. We saw Rocky carrying the logs. We needed both.
Yeah, I mean, listen, but Vincent isn't dumb. He's just cocky, right? Like he's a character and he learned to use that to his advantage. Make everyone think you can't stand to lose. He's playing off that ability where he knows that that's what Eddie thinks of him. And that's what the rest of the world has started to think of him. And then you play the odds against yourself. I mean, it makes sense to me. It doesn't take a genius to figure it out.
And I thought that it was a great kind of twist here, because I'll be very honest, up to this point, I was not sold on this movie. I thought it was kind of boring, thought it was kind of slow, like a game of pool. And then there's this reveal that Vincent set the whole throwing of the game up. And I thought that was actually pretty great. I thought the reveal was good. I thought that Newman, I think he won his Oscar for that scene, because the camera kind of like pans over to him, and in his face, there's this realization of this monster he's created in Vincent. And so Vincent's become everything he wanted him to be. And then he was taken in the hustle, like he was the target. And that sadness and the realization that he's not the greatest. And then y'all, the regret that just like drips all over his face. It was so good.
Yeah, watching Paul Newman struggle between composure and helpless rage, it was really something. Big D, as you would say, acting.
Acting. Dude, what about the scene where we've watched him compose the whole movie? And then he beats Vincent and he walks out the door of the convention center and goes, yes! Composes himself and walks back in. And Gene, you mentioned it early on. He self-sabotaged because he didn't think he could do it. Now he climbed that mountain, and only to find he failed again. It's a kick in the teeth. And I think you're right. Newman won the Oscar for that scene alone.
In his semifinal match, Eddie sees his reflection in the 2-ball. Disgruntled, he forfeits the game and returns Vincent's money. With plans to live with Janelle and determined to win legitimately, Eddie faces Vincent in a private match, declaring, "I'm back."
So, as you mentioned it, the movie does not follow the expected formula. You think it's building up to this final showdown. It's going to be the finals. Who's going to win, Vincent or Eddie? And it's not that. The movie goes in a completely unexpected direction. And I liked it. But the end, I think, does away with a lot of the growth and the questions that we have. I don't know if they were setting up a third movie, but like, is Eddie going to the Bahamas now? We see he's grown emotionally. He's now found someone he can love. He's going to get an apartment with her. You know, is he going back to now hustling? Because it seemed like he was ready to give it all up when he was kind of broken. He's like, Vincent, I only got a couple games left in me. Now, all of a sudden, I'm back in the game. What's happening?
I think it's all those things. I think Eddie is going to the Bahamas. I think that she is moving in with him. And I think he's going to haunt Vincent and keep playing him until he wins, which he never will. Like, he's never going to beat Vincent. And that's okay. That is his life now.
Yeah, and I think that we've seen a lot of kind of grandstanding in films before from characters like Eddie and from Vincent type characters. And, it's men doing manly things and celebrating in manly ways. And I was expecting that to be what happens here, for us to have a lot of, testosterone, coming into play here. And it isn't, because when you can get past the stupid shot of his reflection in the pool ball, because that was dumb. But when you get past that and you see that Newman has forfeited and that he returns the money and he just deuces and walks out, right? It is the most baller move, I would argue, we have seen in any movie ever. And so I'm a huge fan of the show Silicon Valley. And there's this line in that show that I probably say more than any other line from pop culture, which is, this dude fucks, right? And this guy, Paul Newman, he fucks.
And that brings up the question that the movie is asking the whole time, which is, what's important, money or pride, right? Like, whose view of the world is more accurate, Vincent's or Eddie's? Or is Eddie's view of the world actually Vincent's, and he's just covered it up under layers of other bullshit that he's using to cope? And the line that hit me hardest out of this movie is when Eddie is trying to get Vincent to go with him on the 6-week trip. And Vincent tells Eddie, "This is my job," referring to working at the toy store. And Eddie replies, "I think it's your problem." And how many of us fucking confuse our job with our problem, right? It is the one thing that is holding you back from what you really, really want. Humans are fucking strange. Money means something. As I get older, I really, really realize it. It gets you things. It keeps you fed. It's possibly the most valuable asset in life other than time, but it's so hard to prioritize money over pride, and pride gets you nothing. It's literally fucking worthless. You can't eat pride. You can't buy a home with pride. Your pride can't become a gift for someone else, and it can't pay your bills. It's pretty much worthless, but it means so much more than money. And I think that if this movie accomplishes anything, it drives that point home perhaps more effectively than anything I've seen.
I think, Gene, you left out the most important quote. The line that he says, money won is twice as sweet as money earned. There's a lot of people whose lives are driven by the juice. Today, you do Krav Maga, you're able to challenge yourself physically, that you can get out that ability to see, where do I measure up? Am I good enough? Am I getting better at something? And I think without that challenge in people's lives, the money, everything else loses its excitement. You need the juice. You need the action. And I think in the end, that's what gives Eddie back the spice for life, is that he's back in the game.
So let me ask you this. Two of you, would you rather compete for your money or to have a guaranteed paycheck?
Guaranteed paycheck.
Me too.
Yeah, see, I'm a pussy. I don't like to gamble because I always think about the loss. I don't get excited about what the potential win would be.
Yeah, people get fucking excited about gambling. I just get anxious.
Yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah, I get angry. I'm like, fuck, I just lost $20. That would have bought X, Y, and Z, Give me my money.
No. I got scarred early on. When I got into the Army, I got a signing bonus, and my brother-in-law worked in some finance, so he gave me a stock recommendation. So I put my full bonus into it. Woo! Ever since that day, yes, I do, conservative 401k investments for my future, but my gambling ended right there that day.
All right. Well, now is the time when we give our wipe scores for The Color of Money. Zero Wipes is a perfect movie. It is a Vincent Lauria trick shot straight into the hole, 9-ball. 5 wipes is an absolute disaster. It is Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio's hair throughout this film. God, what a fucking disaster. Ash, we'll start with you. What is your wipe score for The Color of Money?
Well, like her hair, this movie is not perfect. I don't buy, and I apologize to all of you cinema lovers out there, but I don't think this is Scorsese's best film. I would argue that, The Departed is a significantly better film than this. I would argue Godfather 2 is a significantly better film than this. And I personally am in the camp that Godfather 2 is his best movie, but I enjoyed this movie. I think that it's really good. It is too long. I don't think all of the script works, but the second half of the film, I loved. I thought the acting was fantastic. I thought, of course, Scorsese's directing is flawless. And I thought the ending was a really big payoff in a way that I was not predicting. And I'm like you, Big D. I was ruined long before Shat. I'm that person that is so fucking annoying where like I will predict the end of a film and people don't like that about me. And it makes me not enjoy certain films as much. But this one I wasn't expecting. It was not your cliche sports movie. And I really loved it. I think it's a better than average film. And I'm going to give it 1.5 wipes.
All right. That's 1.5 wipes from Ash. I'm going to piss a lot of people off here, but this movie is well acted. Like, I'll give it that. But it is 2 hours about pool. Fucking pool. It's a game I don't even want to play, much less watch. It's a dull game, I think, with dull characters and dull developments. The movie is beautiful to look at, Ash. You're absolutely right. That scene that Scorsese shoots where Eddie and Janelle are dancing, like ballroom dancing in that room with the mirrors. I mean, the chandeliers, it fucking breathtaking. And it's borderline crushing in its examination of Eddie, but I felt like I was in pool hall purgatory watching the same shit just happen again and again for 120 minutes. So for me, this is a below average movie at 3 wipes.
See, I think I'm somewhere in between both of you. I agree with points you've both made. I think it is long. The beginning dragged. It felt a bit self-indulgent. There were some scenes that you thought could have been pared down, and I was like, okay, I think it's going to be the editing. So I go and look up the editor, Thelma Schoolmaker, and she's won Academy Awards for The Departed, Raging Bull, The Irishman. So she's legit. She knows what she's doing.
I mean, The Irishman was horribly long, though.
It was.
Yeah, and you know,
very bloated.
The film's beautiful. I think it's entertaining. The second half I really loved. So I feel guilty doing it, especially that we had an Academy Award winning performance in it. But I think it's somewhere in between both of your scores. I think a 1.75. It is a good movie cinematically, but I don't think I'm going to go back and watch this anytime other than maybe seeing The Hustler and then dabbling. But this is the last time in my life I will intentionally watch this film.
All right. So 1.5 wipes from Ash, 3 wipes from me, and 1.7 wipes from Big D. That gives us a average wipe score of 2.083 repeating wipes for The Color of Money.
So Gene with a final score of 2.083 wipes. That now ties us with a film in one of our favorite genres, submarine movies, in the 97 spot with the film Crimson Tide. It is slightly better than Home Alone, Major League, and The Goonies, and slightly worse than Tommy Boy, Pet Sematary, and The Blues Brothers.
Oh my God. I have so many things to say. The Goonies, I get is problematic, but fucking Home Alone is a perfect movie. I love that movie.
Which movie's perfect?
Home Alone.
Home Alone is shit.
It's shit.
I fucking love that movie.
Yeah, but The Goonies, that's Roger, gave it a 3.
I love The Goonies.
Yep.
This is not as good as The Goonies.
I mean, I think it boils down to, for me, it wasn't an enjoyable movie, so that somewhat affected it, but it's a good film.
Okay, see, there it is. See, and, you know, out there, this is our conundrum number 367 doing this, is you're right. That's really important. There's enjoyable and there's good, right? Yeah. I enjoy The Goonies a lot more than I enjoy this movie. But did you say this is worse than Pet Sematary?
Looks like that's what the score said.
That's a shitty fucking movie, guys.
You can fucking blame Carrie Gross for that.
Big D, bring back your point. 0637 repeating.
Yeah, no, blame Carrie Gross for that.
Yeah, Carrie Gross is running around with a fucking watering can of joy for like any horror movie that we've ever done.
God.
Yeah.
Thank you, David, for commissioning The Color Money. Big D, do we have any voicemail or email this week?
So, Gene, before we get to our correspondence this week, I just want to wish one of our listeners, Johnny from Boston, a happy 43rd birthday. I hope you have a wicked pissa and don't end up getting in jail. But thank you for listening. And we hope you make it through your birthday and many more. But this week, Gene, we've gotten a bunch of correspondence. And the first one is from somebody who is as psychotic as I am. A few months ago, I had gone through our scoring system and I tried to come up with a way to improve, the Shat scores and refine them. And I thought my spreadsheets were nuts until I saw one from our listener, Jody G. So now Jody G wanted to commission a movie, and she wrote in and she said, I'd like to commission another couple movies, and I'm having trouble deciding. My first commission was decided after a few cocktails and some late nights Amazon surfing. So this time I wanted to have a more nuanced approach. However, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole yesterday, and she has a spreadsheet attached to now a checklist. And her checklist said, I combed through every 80s and 90s movie listed in Wikipedia. 2, I selected movies that I A, liked, B, knew well, C, thought were interesting, D, I could remember as if I'd already seen them, and then 3, I came down to 92 movies. Then I ranked them 1 to 92 based on how much I liked them. Next, I pulled the Rotten Tomatoes scores from critics and audiences and ranked them from 1 to 92 each. I then averaged each of the rankings with weight given for a final 1 to 92 ranking. Then I eliminated any of them that had already gone through or on the schedule. I think I eliminated all the ones that were scheduled. I then took the top remaining movies and narrowed them down to this final list. And she gives us a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 movies. And she wanted us to pick one. So I said, all right, you can pick one. And she chose from the list that she wanted to do 1991, Albert Brooks's Defend Your Life. And the film she left us with that we have to vote on right now and pick is Reservoir Dogs, LA Confidential, American History X, Stripes, Superman 2, Man on the Moon, and A Simple Plan.
God damn.
It's Reservoir Dogs. Why are we even talking about this?
I'm
It's
sorry.
fucking
Well, Reservoir
Dogs.
Dogs is fucking outstanding, but American History X is also fucking outstanding.
I don't want to do American History X on this podcast. I think that sounds like a terrible idea.
I think so too. It would be like half the cast would be like zoom, 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 zoom. Boom,
I
boom,
mean,
boom,
seriously,
boom, boom.
if Lovecraft Country taught us anything, Gene Lyons, no, Shat. I mean, we are not the podcast to cover American fucking History X, which has actual prison rape in it. I think it is clearly fucking Reservoir Dogs. Hello.
We've also never done a Superman movie.
Gross. Reservoir Dogs.
But I don't think that's a good one.
Reservoir Dogs.
Are you kidding me? It's got Gene Hackman.
Yeah, third one is Richard Pryor, the computer hacker. Then there's the lightning guy in yellow in the fourth one. Stripes is not as good as you remember it. I'm leaning towards Reservoir Dogs, even though Superman 2 could be something different. I just feel like we're long overdue for Reservoir Dogs. I feel like it's missing from our portfolio of films. So I think, Gene, you lose 2 to 1.
No, I
don't think he lost. He wins because it's Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah, it's Reservoir Dogs. No, but I was just saying that I think it's that those are all excellent picks, maybe with the exception of Stripes.
Yeah, so Jody G, thank you very much. So the other movie we will be adding to the schedule is 1992 Reservoir Dogs.
Woo, Tarantino.
Yep. Next, I want to share a comment that one of our listeners, Maxwell, had DM'd me in Twitter, and he sent this. Hi, Dick. I know this is outdated, but I just came across the pod in the Maximum Overdrive episode. My father used to drive a service truck route from Fayetteville, North Carolina to Wilmington, North Carolina in the 80s. He pulled into the Dixie Boy diner set in Leland, North Carolina, thinking it was a real truck stop. Long story short, they used his truck in the movie. Then he was fired after missing 2 days of work after doing Blow with Emilio Estevez. So Maxwell, thank you very much for that story, and I'm glad we could bring back that wonderful memory for you and your father.
I'm amazed that truckers in the 80s could get fired for doing Blow and missing work. I thought that was just kind of normal in the 80s for truckers. Like they would just they're all lone wolves doing a bunch of speed and coke and pissing in jars.
Living the dream.
I thought it came in the starter kit, some meth, some coke, and some energy drinks. But back then it was probably something else. So that's it for this week. But Gene, next week is a movie that I have a vivid memory sitting up late at night and watching on HBO when my parents went to sleep. And I think a lot of our listeners have never seen this. It's one of those that came out, and the main actor in it, I think, will surprise people because you're not used to him for playing this kind of role. But the movie tells the story of Johnny Kelly, who lives a double life. At home, he's a good apple, looking after his ailing mother and sexually oppressed brother Tommy. But his not-so-secret life is as Johnny Dangerously, an up-and-coming criminal being groomed by local gangster Jocko Dundee. Johnny's crime money puts Tommy through law school, but when his brother becomes district attorney, Johnny must protect him from the murderous Danny Vermin, commissioned by Jason D., released in 1984. And it only made $17.1 million at the box office, but I have great memories of this as a kid. Either of you seen it?
No.
It's fucking wild.
I saw the trailer for it as a child and remember thinking it looked ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be problematic, but it was funny back then.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you, Jason, for commissioning that movie. And thank you, David, for commissioning The Color of Money. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. You can email us, hosts@shatthemovies.com, or save us a little bit of trouble and give us a voicemail, 914-719-SHAT. You can support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, completing a free anonymous survey to help attract advertisers, buying our merch, or by commissioning your own movie. Find all that information by visiting our website, shatthemovies.com. Also, you can check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV. We review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all the information on our website, shatontv.com. Wherever fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, and Ash Schlafly, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for this gem.
Hey, I know you. You're from Saturday Night Live. You're Joe
I'm Danny Vermin. This chump was going to show you some previews for a new gangster movie called Johnny Dangerously. Check this out. Does this jerk look like a real gangster to you? He looks like Michael Keaton to me.
I love Johnny t-shirts. I love Johnny.
Believe it or not, everybody loves this guy. Broads love him.
I'm not wearing a bra, Johnny.
That makes two of us. Oh, you got what you had left, Ma.
His mother loves him.
I love him, but someday I'm gonna knock him on his...
We should spend some time together.
The DA loves him.
Say, 2 weeks in Puerto Rico.
You got fire. Verb.
The new torch singer loves him.
You got those. I like those on women.
Little babies love him.
Oh, wait.
The warden loves him.
Johnny, it's an honor to have you on death row.
Ah, don't be silly. Pleasure's all mine.
Even the Pope loves him.
Build yourself a new gym at the Vatican, huh?
Well, this is one guy who ain't got no love for this phony. You shouldn't hang me on a hook. My father hung me on a hook once. Well, Johnny's busted my chops for the last time.
Gee, you look like a terrific guy to me.
Oops.
Michael Keaton,
Joe Piscopo,
Danny DeVito,
Dom
Mary Lou
DeLuise,
Henner,
Peter Boyle,
Green Stapleton,
Griffin Dunn,
Dennis O'Connor,
Richard
Alan
Dimitri,
Hale
Ray
Jr.
Walston.
See Johnny Dangerously at a selected theater near you.
I knew somebody who went to a selected theater once. Title song by Weird Al Yankovic.